cooperated, we need to be careful, because what we'll have here, we will have myriads of legislation that are doing the same intention, but appearing as different acts of parliaments. And Senate and the National Assembly is really one parliament. And so we should have some harmony in how we approach this.
So
and
what
so
are you saying, Honorable
I'm
Kajwang,
suggesting,
that we
Mr.
proceed
Speaker,
to debate it, or we step it down?
I'm trying to persuade my friend, whom I'm sure has looked at Article 109, that we need to consider this a little bit. Step it down, have consultation, and as the minority leaders suggest, which I concur, take these views to the Senate. They may or may not be incorporated. If they are not incorporated, my friend has an opportunity to bring this bill back here as an amendment, and we will bring in whatever it is which has not been incorporated. But to try to have two pieces of legislation that are competing in space will be very untidy as a parliament, whether it is Senate or whether it is National Assembly. So okay. I am just trying to persuade my friend.
Now there is
that,
a problem. There is a problem here.
Yes,
there
sir.
are three classmates involved. One pulling one direction, one pulling the other direction, and one in the middle. Now that becomes a big of a problem. So let me make Honorable Jagagwa. Well, I will not disclose the third one, but the two just spoke are classmates. Now, let me ask Honorable Jagagwa, if this matter is stepped down and you process any differences within the Senate, and if you are unable to do that, you come back to the House and proceed, is that going to be totally a problem for you? If it is not, then we can go that direction. If it is, we'll go the other direction.
Mr. Speaker, before maybe I make my comments, you've uttered two words, that if it's not, we take one direction. If it's not, we take the other direction. Maybe could I seek your clarification as to
I'm just asking you, would you have any loss if this matter is stepped down, and then you process this matter in the Senate, and if it is not processed properly to your expectation, you proceed with the National Assembly private members?
With tremendous respect to the questions posed by the Speaker to me this morning, I would humbly request that you let this House discuss this bill this morning.
Okay, now, honorable members, I think we are not going to take too long on this. We have already taken enough time. I am really trying to see what laws we will have stepping down this matter. I'm also trying to look at the loss we will incur by proceeding. And from where I sit, I really don't want to participate in making decision one way or the other in terms of how the bill will proceed. Because I see there is, the House is divided right in the middle. So it's a real problem. Now, the easier way for me is for you to have the opportunity to make your decisions. That's the right procedure in my thinking. So I will allow the motion to be processed. I will allow the motion to proceed. And then the members will have an opportunity to either reject whatever has been proposed by Honorable Jagagwa, or whichever direction you take, so that I don't be the one making the decision for members. So that is, I think, the easiest bit for me to rule. Let's proceed with the motion, with the bill, rather. You process it, because the leader of majority has said this matter was transacted in the House Business Committee. The chair of the committee is telling us that they have actually a report and they have supported it. So we will allow the members to make their decision at the right time. That is the easiest way that we can resolve this matter. Wasting the time? Maybe. But we will try and see how we can, if eventually it turns out that the things are the same, we would obviously have wasted time. But we'll see a way of trying to recover the lost time. So the mover, proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for that well-considered ruling. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the County Pension Scheme Bill, National Assembly Bill number 49 of 2007, 2017 be read a second time. Mr. Speaker, the main crux of this bill is that after the promulgation of the Constitution in 2010, there wasn't a single piece of legislation that was going to cater for pensioners in the county, government. Mr. Speaker, as we speak today, many employees of the county governments do not save their money, and we must appreciate that the benefits of saving are myriad. Mr. Speaker, we've seen a situation where we're having the previous councillors. Mr. Speaker, they have even petitioned this parliament that they have not been paid their pensions. Mr. Speaker, I'll approach this matter in a three-pronged matter. One is the global picture on pensions, the pension schemes and savings as it were in Kenya, and this current bill. Mr. Speaker, we'll appreciate that the easiest form of growing pensioners' money is through savings. And we have seen a situation where even in our own country, the people that come to invest in our blue chip companies at the stock exchange are actually pension funds from outside this country. Mr. Speaker, like I said earlier, the insurance schemes can actually use the pensioners' money, Mr. Speaker, as a form of saving and to grow their pensioners' savings. Mr. Speaker, like I also said again, the worst bit of our saving is that our pension schemes invest in what we call real estate and land, and that is money that is not easily available when needed. So, Mr. Speaker, that is why we have said, I'm stating in this bill that, Mr. Speaker, we must encourage the county employees to make a saving. Mr. Speaker, this bill establishes the county pension scheme, and in it, Mr. Speaker, we have the relevant clauses on interpretations. At the same time, Mr. Speaker, the county pension scheme will be administered by a board. This board, Mr. Speaker, will have trustees, and the trustees will be appointed, Mr. Speaker, by the minister. But for one to qualify to be a trustee, Mr. Speaker, one must meet certain key qualifications. And those are that one must be a Kenyan citizen, he must hold a degree from a recognized university in Kenya. Mr. Speaker, such a member must also, Mr. Speaker, be qualified in one of the following disciplines, that is in the discipline of law, in the discipline of economics, in the discipline of finance, in the discipline of agriculture, in the discipline of nursing, in the discipline of a doctorate, and in the discipline of actuarial science. Mr. Speaker, for one again to be a trustee member, one must meet the qualifications set out in Chapter 6 of the Constitution, so that, Mr. Speaker, we do not have persons who are managing people's pensions and money who are wanting qualifications. Mr. Speaker, once the trustees, Mr. Speaker, will come from various organizations. One of them, Mr. Speaker, is that the trustees will be drawn from a representative from the Council of Governors. There will also be a representative from the county assemblies. There will also be a representative, Mr. Speaker, from the Public Service Commission. There will also be a representative from the assemblies, county bodies, and at least 5 other members, Mr. Speaker. We must appreciate that in all those representative bodies, the pensioners will be well catered for, in that they will have trustees who will be able to take care of their interests from all those various organizations that I've stated. Mr. Speaker, of much interest and is that the representative from the Public Service Commission will set in on the matter of gender balance, so that if the other representatives from the other organizations do not have the element of gender representation, then the representative from the Public Service Commission will step in to cure the element, Mr. Speaker, of gender imbalance. Mr. Speaker, it is once the trustees are gazetted, once the trustees come into place, Mr. Speaker, they shall be gazetted by the minister before they formally begin their job. Mr. Speaker, is the same minister again, the same cabinet secretary who can remove such a member, one, if the member is actually incompetent in performing their duties, if the member is misconducting himself, or if the member, again, Mr. Speaker, is negligent in the performance of his duty. Again, Mr. Speaker, this cabinet secretary can remove such a member if he is bankrupt. Mr. Speaker, a trustee may also, in his own volition, cease to be a trustee if he resigns or by death, or, Mr. Speaker, if the member is negligent in the performance of his duty, if the trustee, Mr. Speaker, misconducts himself, or again, like I've said, Mr. Speaker, if he is outrightly incompetent in performing his duties. Mr. Speaker, it is a duty of the board that is promulgated may, Mr. Speaker, the board may, in its own volition, appoint or co-opt members co-opt members who will assist it in the furtherance of the board's duties. But any such people that they co-opt may not exceed 5, but there may be in a minimum of 3 members. Mr. Speaker, the board also has a prerogative of appointing what we call a Sharia Supervisory Committee. Mr. Speaker, these will be members who are conversant in Sharia law, who will advise the board in matters of Sharia, that the Shalias are well operated and in conformity with the Sharia law. Mr. Speaker, any trustee, again, who is appointed, Mr. Speaker, must be will serve for a term of 3 years and is eligible for a renewal of his term for a final term of 3 years. But, Mr. Speaker, to save the money and the resources of the board, the trustees, Mr. Speaker, will serve for what I call, what the bill says on part-time basis. Mr. Speaker, the members who are members of this scheme will be contributing 12% of their pensionable emolument, while the sponsor, Mr. Speaker, who is the employer, will again contribute 15% of the members' pensionable emolument. So in total, Mr. Speaker, the scheme will be receiving about 27% of the workers' pensionable emoluments, Mr. Speaker. These will go in a long way, Mr. Speaker, in assisting such contributors and members in their retirement age, Mr. Speaker, so that we do not have a situation where that when a member retires that he is unable to meet his basic obligations, Mr. Speaker. This bill also proposes that, Mr. Speaker, the board will appoint an administrator, and it is the administrator, Mr. Speaker. The administrator will be a corporate body, and this corporate body, Mr. Speaker, will be actually a company formed under what we call under the Companies Act and the provisions of this bill, Mr. Speaker. The administrator, Mr. Speaker, will be able to take care and manage the resources and the investments of the members, the sponsors, and the employees. We'll also keep proper books of accounts, Mr. Speaker, of the scheme. We'll also file what we call necessary and mandatory statutory notices, Mr. Speaker. And at the beginning of each financial year, Mr. Speaker, the administrator will give estimates and expenditure for the scheme, Mr. Speaker. It is Mr. Speaker, the bill also proposes that we shall have 10 years of office, which I've said is 3 years. The trustees will be remunerated for the reasonable work they do. And Mr. Speaker, Once a vacancy arises in the number of trustees, then the relevant cabinet secretary, Mr. Speaker, will be in a position to fill that occurring vacancy per the provisions of this act, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the administrator again will be able to take care of the investment funds and the surplus funds of the scheme, and also give audited accounts, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when I come to the objects, the main object is that that they are what we are calling the preliminaries to this bill, Mr. Speaker. The board will formulate policies relating to the scheme. It will also collect contributions from the members. It will also pay various benefits to people entitled to those benefits. And generally, Mr. Speaker, the trustees will exercise prudent management skills in matters of members' contribution. Mr. Speaker, we have known a situation in the past where funds of members were misappropriated, where members' pensionable funds were not limited. Mr. Speaker, anybody who withholds, anybody first who gives false information to the board, anybody who willfully neglects to remit money to the trustees is liable, is guilty of an offense, and is liable to imprisonment for a term of 2 years or a maximum fine of 5 million, or to both the fine and the imprisonment. Mr. Speaker, the administrator again shall appoint a custodian, and it is the custodian who will keep all the relevant titles, assets, and receive money or monies for and on behalf, Mr. Speaker, of the trustee. The custodian again will execute all relevant documents, Mr. Speaker, for and on behalf of the board, Mr. Speaker. Like I said earlier, the administrator will be a corporate body and will be formed in conjunction with the closed funds and this scheme, Mr. Speaker. As I come to winding up, Mr. Speaker, we must appreciate the role of the pension, what it does for Kenyans and for the world at large. And we have said that if pension funds are used prudently, Mr. Speaker, we will not be seeing a situation what we are seeing with the previous members of who are councillors. Mr. Speaker, they were in an executive position, but they never were able to push the pension funds to make their remittances. That is why, Mr. Speaker, with tremendous respect again, they have now come filed a petition to this parliament that they need pensions. We do not wish, Mr. Speaker, to see the staff that is seconded from the various ministries to the county government, or the new members who are employed by the county government, Mr. Speaker, after retirement languishing in poverty. We know that it's after retirement that a person gets more bills, Mr. Speaker, in terms of medical bills to pay. Others are pushing for Mr. Speaker, for clearing school fees for their children. And it is this pension, Mr. Speaker, that will assist them, Mr. Speaker, in meeting their basic needs. Mr. Speaker, we're also saying in this bill that this parliament, and now I come to where members were saying that this parliament again will, on its own motion, or on being petitioned by anybody, will be in a position to amend these pensions act, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, with those remarks, I now beg that my honourable colleague, the chairman of the Finance Committee, Mr. Rimo, to second this bill, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
You beg to move. Honorable Limo, you said?
Yes, yes.
Yes, Honorable Limo, you have the floor. Yeah, you can use the next one, Honorable Limo.
All right, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Limo, I think you are still not on record. Please give him. I should be okay, Honorable Limo. Is that?
It's not working.
Yes, proceed.
Okay. Yeah, initially, Mr. Speaker, it was not working. Mr. Speaker,
there seems to be a technical hitch. Limo, just a minute, so that Honorable Limo, just a minute, so that you could use the next. Sorry that you have to keep moving.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I hope I'll not be required to move again, but all the same, I'm capable of moving everywhere. Mr. Speaker, as I stand to second the bill by Honorable Jagagwa, I want to thank him for the work which he has done, because, you know, coming up with a bill and pushing the bill up to this level is not very easy, and therefore, Mr. Speaker, we need to thank him and recognizing that, in fact, currently, the private members' bills are very few, Mr. Speaker, because it's not very easy, and they are still in the pipeline. So having said that, Mr. Speaker, there is a county pensions scheme, Mr. Speaker, came to our committee, I think last year, Mr. Speaker, and in line with what we are required to do, Mr. Speaker, we did public participation, Mr. Speaker, and on the basis of memoranda, which we had received by 19 February 2018, which was a deadline for forwarding memoranda from the various stakeholders, we went ahead and did public participation, Mr. Speaker, in line with the constitutional requirement that there is need for us to do public participation for every bill or every transaction we make on behalf of Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, we did public participation, and we had quite a number of organizations which came to do a presentation on the various issues, touching on various issues. Among them, Mr. Speaker, we had local authorities provident fund, which is popularly known as LAP fund, which came to do a presentation, Mr. Speaker. We also had the Ministry of Public Service, Youth and Gender Affairs, Mr. Speaker, and in the same meeting, Mr. Speaker, we also had a presentation by the societies of clerks at the table in Kenyan legislature, which is popularly known as SOCAT, which is an organization which brings together all the clerks in the county assemblies. Mr. Speaker, we also had the Kenya Union of Clinical Officers, which is a representative of, is a union representing the clinical officers in all the hospitals in Kenya. Mr. Speaker, in the same breath, the County Public Service Board, National Consultative Forum, which brings together all the county public service boards across the country, across all the 47 counties. Mr. Speaker, the Association of Pension Administrators of Kenya, which brings together the pension administrators all over the country, also came before us and made their presentation. Mr. Speaker, the Kenya County Government Workers Union, which is a union for all the county government workers who work in different counties. We had also Mr. B, who was also representing, I think, the Union of Nurses. And then we had the Council of Governors. The Council of Governors also made a presentation, and as I finish on the organizations which came before us, we also had the County Assembly of Nairobi. The County Assembly of Nairobi came on its own. We had also Honorable Joy Donde. Honorable Joy Donde is popularly known on the issues of interest rates. Mr. Speaker, we had also the Kenyan National Union of Nurses. Honorable Muriuki Jagagwa himself, who is a mover, appeared before us. And finally, Mr. Speaker, we had also the National Treasury, which was represented by the Cabinet Secretary, Mr. Henry Rotich. In all these forum, Mr. Speaker, most of the stakeholders made presentations which were varying in nature, Mr. Speaker. But one thing which every representative of this organization supported is that the county assemblies, the county executive, the county governments in general must have a coordinated pension scheme. Because currently, Mr. Speaker, when the employees in the counties are employed and they are given appointment letters, it is very conventional for every organization to have an appointment letter which states the terms and conditions of service, including and not limited to that you will be a member of a pension scheme, blah, 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 depending on the length of probation. But currently, in almost every county government, do not have that leeway of writing that you will be a member of this county pension scheme or this and this county retirement scheme, because there is no standard. There is no standard scheme in place now. What they have, Mr. Speaker, as I had stated earlier, is that we have two kinds of schemes which give the employee an option of joining. One is a scheme called LAP Fund, which was a creation of an act of parliament. It is currently recruiting members from all the counties, depending on what the employee will prefer. The other one is popularly known as CPF, which is called the County Pension Fund, which was a creation of lab trust, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, we need, in their view, every stakeholder indicated that it will be appropriate if we could have a pension scheme for county assemblies and county governments, that is executive, which will actually then be very easy for the county assemblies and the county government to indicate when they are employing their employees, so that we have a coordinated way of getting pension. Mr. Speaker, I want to state very clearly that it is important to have a very good pension scheme for employees in this country. It is actually difficult that when you retire, you do not have pension. I can actually indicate to you that among the stakeholders who appeared before us, though they were not relevant for this particular bill, were the former councillors. The former councillors in this country are really suffering. are really suffering because they do not have, one, they did not get even a single cent when they were leaving office. They are not getting any payment currently. And you see, there is a belief by the scholars that there is something, Mr. Speaker, which is called the agony of retirement. Yeah, there is something which we call agony of retirement, which means there is a clear indication that when someone retires, within the first 5 years, Mr. Speaker, the first 5 years, it is very difficult to go beyond 5 years because, you know, you will be seeing your savings depleting. You will be seeing your assets depleting, but there is nothing coming every month. So it is important to have something to hold on when you retire. And therefore, I'll urge this House that we consider and ensure that there is a coordinated pension scheme for the workers. I want to reiterate the point which some members had indicated here, that why are we having confusion? The same confusion, Mr. Speaker, we saw during public participation.
Honorable Limo. Honorable TJ Kajwang, what is it? You seem to have pressed an intervention.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, I'm just wondering how long the Speaker has, because as I understand it, is just seconding a motion. I know that is the chair, but he's not speaking as the chair. He's speaking as a member seconding the bill. How long are we going to give him to second the bill?
Well, yes, Honorable TJ Kajwang, the Honorable Limo is on this situation. He is seconding, but he's also the chair, and the chair of the relevant committee. And in that case, he, as the chair of the relevant committee, in this case, he doubles as two. On this case, I'll consider him also as the chair of the relevant committee, and he has that minutes. He has that minutes from the time he started, so I'm sure he will be allotted when the time is over.
All right, Mr. Speaker, you know, I thought I respect Mheshimiwa Kajwang because, you know, one time before before in the 11th Parliament, he was also sitting in the seat you are sitting. And therefore, I did not expect that he will have forgotten that private member's bill.
Proceed, Honorable Chair, you are taking your time now.
Mr. Speaker, I want to continue. And you know, as I second, the formula is very clear that I'm talking on what we saw during public participation. Mr. Speaker, the councillors who came before us, when we looked at them, we don't want our current MCAs to go into that. We don't want our current members of parliament or any member of this any member of the public in this republic who is currently working to go into this situation where you really suffer. Mr. Speaker, I want to make it very clear. If there is any confusion, Mr. Speaker, we saw it during public participation. Our committee can attest to that, that the County Assemblies Forum and the Council of Governors were talking in different directions. And we really sympathize to that. And we cannot, Mr. Speaker, bury our heads in the sand and leave the confusion to go on. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that we saw their different views were like pulling in one direction, depending on the history where they were belonging. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, during public participation, we picked that unless this House stands and make laws for posterity, then we are going to have problems. Because currently, the Council of Governors, I understand, Mr. Speaker, are actually pushing and asking why the national government or the National Assembly or the Senate is trying to push them into a scheme they do not want. So I want to say this as I finish, Mr. Speaker. In the third reading, we have an option. We have an option of amending this bill so that it actually stands for one side of the government. That means this bill, in its own original format, is indicating that it is for the staff and the officers of county assemblies, of county governments. We can actually amend it to suit what the governors need, that it is for the county government executive and its officers. And then the other one, which is in the Senate, we still have an option of amending it to say it is for the officers and staff of county assemblies. Then we finish all this. We become a midwife. And that is how we are supposed to behave as a house, which is actually a house which is responsible to make laws and finish all the squabbles in the country. Mr. Speaker, I want to support this bill, which is brought by Honorable Jagagwa, and say that our committee has made and has proposed several amendments, which actually will be moving at the third reading to make it in line. And among them, depending on the consultations which will go on, we can actually then amend it to be in line with what we want to make or what we want to do in this house to bring harmony among the county assemblies and the county executive. Mr. Speaker, having made those particular remarks, Mr. Speaker, I beg to second.
Honorable members, I propose a question, which is that the County Pension Scheme Bill, National Assembly Bill number 49 of 2017 be now read a second time. Honorable, I see Honorable John Buddy, you wanted to speak, but I wanted to give one or two people before you so that you listen to them. Or I know you'd have priority in speaking, but anyway, you have stood, Honorable Buddy.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Mr. Speaker, I think there's no harm really in I contributing at the moment because, Mr. Speaker, I actually had difficulties with this bill. You were not on the chair that time. The Deputy Speaker was. But, Mr. Speaker, now that we are debating the bill, let me just put my points across very clearly. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank Honorable Jagagwa for bringing a legislation or proposed bill to the House. But, Mr. Speaker, probably because this bill came earlier, it would have been better if we dealt with it before the government bill that we dealt with. Because, Mr. Speaker, I would say without any fear of contradiction that in my view, the debate and legislation of this bill will be merely but a waste of Parliament's time. We actually considered a similar bill with similar provisions, which is at the Senate, and it would have been more decent if those who have issues with this bill, the bill that we passed, go to the Senate and have their matters addressed. Mr. Speaker, I've just listened to the Chair of Finance and Planning Committee talk about this bill probably addressing just the executive part of the county government or county government executive, and the other bill that we passed addressing maybe the county assemblies, etc. But, Mr. Speaker, if you look at the objects of the bill before us, it says that the object and purpose of the Act is to provide for the adoption of an existing umbrella pension scheme for all staff and officers of county governments, county agencies, county corporations, associated organizations, and other related entities. Mr. Speaker, when you talk about county, it is like this bill is going to cover all the staff of counties, whether at the assembly and at the executive. There is no distinction. And, Mr. Speaker, I was listening to hear really what is so unique in this bill that was not captured in the other bill that we passed. Mr. Speaker, I'm afraid to say that I did not hear that either from the mover or the seconder. Mr. Speaker, they're talking about, you see the seconder, the chair of the committee has talked about two pension schemes, the LAP Trust and the LAP Fund. He is forgetting that we have already collapsed those schemes into one through the bill that we passed and sent to the Senate, where we passed a bill, and I want to read what that bill was for. It's an act of Parliament to establish the county government's retirement scheme for employees in the service of county governments to provide for retirement benefits of those employees and for connected purposes. That is the bill that we passed and went to the Senate. So, Mr. Speaker, you cannot talk about LAP Trust, LAP Fund. In 5 years, they are not going to exist. We had already passed a legislation that was collapsing all those schemes into one and setting up what we call county government's retirement scheme. Mr. Speaker, I just want to take this House through a comparison of the two bills, because I have both of them. Mr. Speaker, I want to take this House to the board that is being set up. The functions of the board as spelled out in the two bills. The functions of the boards, Mr. Speaker, if you allow me, I want to move there quickly so that this House may realize that we are engaging in an exercise in futility. Mr. Speaker, I want to read the current bill, the bill before us. The current bill says...
Honorable Minority Leader, what is it, Honorable Tuwei Kipkurui, member for Mosop? What is your point of order?
Mr. Speaker, sir, I take it that the leader of minority is engaged in what was actually he was saying before you came in as a speaker when the matter was being discussed for this matter to be either be accepted to go on as it was in the morning by the speaker who was there before you. When you now come in and tell us what this other bill is contradicting the other, Mr. Speaker, I think it's very fair and fair to us. And for me, the private member's motion.
What is your point of order?
My point of order is that is it in order at this stage for the leader of minority to come comparing the two bills before we go in on a serious matter of discussing this thing in the committee of the whole House?
Honorable member for Mosop, you know, even the minority leader doesn't need to respond to that. You know, any member here has a right to prosecute his or her case, to reject, to support, and they take different manners of prosecuting that case, as long as what one does is not offensive to the standing order. So another member will rise and support, another member will rise and reject. That is their right as members on the floor, as long as it doesn't offend
Mr. Speaker,
the standing order.
Mr. Speaker, I hope yes, you will compensate me for the time.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, in fact, you have put it right.
Order. What is it, Honorable Member for Saku?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With due respect to our good friend, Honorable Badi, I think he should oppose the bill if he feels that is the case. But comparing two bills that were passed at different points in time on the floor of this House, I think that is misleading the House, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Honorable Member for Saku, you know, I've just said, look, when a member is supporting or rejecting, they are going to take they are going to prosecute their case in the best way and convince the rest of the members. I'll give someone who supports, I'll give somebody who rejects, as long as the way you do it does not offend the standing order. Yes.
I hope now I will proceed, because this point of order is basically the same. Mr. Speaker, I am not opposed to the content of this bill, and Mr. Speaker, you put it right. The Deputy Speaker did say that he has allowed us, this House, to engage on this matter to see if it is necessary to still pass this bill or reject it. And, Mr. Speaker, my opposition to this bill is because we have passed a similar bill a few days ago. So there is no need of again engaging in another bill. That is the point I'm trying to bring. So, Mr. Speaker, if my colleagues cared to listen, they would understand why we are wasting our valuable time in debating a bill that we could have not debated in the first place. Mr. Speaker, if you look at the functions of the board, and I just want to read the two bills. One, the current bill says, formulate the policies relating to the scheme in accordance with the provisions of Retirement Benefits Act. The other bill was, formulate the policies relating to the scheme in accordance with the provisions of the Retirement Benefits Act 1997. The only difference is 1997. Two, collect contributions and income payable to the fund under this act. This other one, collect contributions and income payable to the funds under this act. C, pay out the various benefits to persons entitled to the benefits as provided under the act. C, pay out the various benefits to persons entitled to the benefits as provided under the act. D, protect the fund's assets. This one, protect the fund's assets. In fact, there are 8 here, there are 8 here. Mr. Speaker, with the same wordings, uplifted from this bill to this other bill. Mr. Speaker, if you go further, even to see the other provisions in this act on the administration of the scheme. Mr. Speaker, on the administration of the scheme, this is what the current bill says. The current bill says the board shall appoint fund managers of the scheme who shall, in addition to the duties prescribed under the Retirement Benefits Act, do the following. A, implement the investment policy of the scheme as provided by the board. This other one says the board shall appoint a fund manager of the scheme who shall, in addition to the duties prescribed under the Retirement Benefits Act, implement the investment policy of the scheme as approved by the board. B, invest the scheme funds and assets in accordance with the provisions of the Retirement Benefits Act and the investment policy of the board. B, manage the scheme funds and assets in accordance with the provisions of the Retirement Benefits Act. Mr. Speaker, we are literally legislating twice in this House. The same thing. I would go on even to talk about appointment and functions of custodian. It is word for word from the bill that we passed. Mr. Speaker, in a nutshell, I can go on and on. The question that I want to ask, what is so difficult, Mr. Speaker? What is so difficult in asking that these amendments that we think are so important that were left in this bill, those amendments can still be taken to the Senate? We have legislators, each one of us here as a senator. Why can't we take these amendments to the senator coming from your county to go and debate in the Senate? And if not, if the Senate will have not looked at them,
you quite persistent. Order, honorable minority leader.
Instead of
order, minority leader, the honorable Serem is on the floor on a point of order, and he is quite persistent. Honorable Serem, what is out of order?
Mr. Speaker, is it in order for the honorable member to refer this House to Senate when we can legislate our own issues in this House, Mr. Speaker? Two, Mr. Speaker, the leader of minority sits in the House business. If he had an issue on the same, why allocate time? Why allow the same to appear before this House? You should have sought your issues out in House Business Committee before you hear, Mr. Speaker. If you have an issue, if it's on the floor, Mr. Speaker, we should proceed.
Honorable, you know, Honorable Serem, I don't want to say what I had said earlier, but on the issue of the House business, I think the Speaker actually addressed himself to that and said, look, the bill is on the floor. If I remember very well what the Speaker pronounced himself to, is on the floor, and the members will prosecute it. But Honorable Serem and the other members will definitely get a chance to speak to this bill as well.
Mr. Speaker, you know I'm not killing this bill. I'm contributing. Honorable Mr. Speaker, I think is a second-term MP, if I'm not wrong. I think I saw him here in last Parliament. If he is, then he should have known by now, even if he was a first-term MP, it is now over 1 year. Honorable Jared Okello, I'm sure, would not make the same mistake he's making today. Because, you see, I am making my contribution whether this bill deserves the attention we are giving it or not. He will have his opportunity to explain to this House why we should legislate basically the same provisions twice without. But Mr. Speaker, I'm not referring this House to the Senate. I'm just saying it would make more sense if anyone who has issues, additional information, would go to the Senate. That's why we have two chambers. And Senate would pass amendments and bring it back to this House for concurrence. In fact, it would be an easy way of dealing with it again as this House. Secondly, we still even have another option, where in the event that the Senate is not going to consider the provisions that we are talking about, which I still don't know anyway, then immediately the bill is assented to and it becomes law. You have a period of 6 months, after which you can now bring substantive amendments. In fact, you can even change the title of the act if you so wish. And at that time, we would consider exhaustively and completely all these amendments that we are required, which I even don't know up to now. Because I was listening to the mover and the seconder, I didn't really hear anything so different from what we passed here. Unless now someone just wants to mischievously hide some information in this bill that this House probably did not attend to, or what they failed to realize in the other bill. So, Mr. Speaker, to me, I think this is actually an abuse of parliamentary process. If we allow something like this to continue, this House would allow something like this to continue, even in future, you cannot stop anyone after bill has been passed, and I know I have 6 months within which I cannot bring another amendment to that bill. I would bring just another bill with similar contents, but just change the title and assume and pretend and mislead the House that I brought a different bill. To me, Mr. Speaker, this is very untidy, and I think I would urge that this House rejects this bill now in entirety, unless we are convinced otherwise, and have those very good amendments, if there are, by Honorable Jagagwa. And Jagagwa is a very good friend of mine. I know he's someone who listens a lot, and a very experienced legislator. Honorable Jagagwa, I'm very much willing to support your amendments, but the process through which they are being brought in this House to me looks mischievous, Mr. Speaker. I know he had very good intention because actually, as a matter of fact, his bill came first. And there should have been a debate between his bill and the Duale's bill and agree on even a bridge version. In fact, the people who have actually let us down is the Chair of Finance, Mr. Speaker. The Chair of Finance should have looked at these two bills. They are the two bills way before. Why couldn't they marry these two bills? This is not the first time we are dealing with the two similar legislations. And this could have been married through a report.
Order, Minority Leader. Honorable Limo, seems that the presentation of Minority Leader is quite attracting points of order. But anyway, you are right. Yeah. What is it?
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, you know, Minority Leader, I really respect him. But on this one, he cannot come and intimidate us and impute improper motive on my committee that will let the House down. Our work is to process every bill which comes to us. And therefore, you cannot dictate us. In fact, if there is anybody who has failed this House, is you. Because you as business committee failed to bring this bill ahead of the other one. And therefore, do not impute improper motive on my committee.
Honorable Limo, even if you are addressing the Minority Leader, you must address him through the chair. Minority Leader seems to have noted your point.
Mr. Speaker, if it appeared that I was intimidating anybody, least of all the chair of the Finance Committee, and if he can be easily intimidated like that, Mr. Speaker, I thought he was a very strong man. In fact, there was a time I was proposing him to be the chair of Budget Committee because I thought he was a very strong man. But it appears he can easily be intimidated. I withdraw any part of my speech that is intimidating. But I want to just put it that in the House Business Committee, we all know that government business takes precedent, Mr. Speaker. But what I thought the Finance Committee would have done, as I wind up, Mr. Speaker, was to marry these two bills, because they were both before the committee, and tell us on how they want us to proceed. But now you have put us in a very untidy situation where we are basically dealing with the same bill in the name of two bills.
Very well. Shall we now have Honorable Tuei Kipkurui, member for Mosop?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First and foremost, I want to thank the Leader of Minority for acknowledging a clear fact that the bill before us came earlier than the government-sponsored one, that according to me, it was a copy, if it was so, from what Mheshimiwa Jagagwa did. May I take this opportunity, first of all, to thank Mheshimiwa for this private motion, because we have always been encouraged by you, Mr. Speaker, to bring in motions that can help us and also make laws in this country. Mr. Speaker, understanding order number 141, 2B, you know for sure that if we don't discuss and debate this bill at the end of this year, because this bill dates back to 2017, it will die. I thank the mover of this motion because he has given it life. The bill we passed, and I want the Leader of Minority to listen to me also. We have been here and we have been receiving a lot of complaints that Senate takes too long to pass the bills. We have been complaining, Mr. Speaker, that Senate takes too long to pass the bills. And I'm very happy that this bill is before us. Should the other one die, like the other bills, let this one be a savior. Because from the way things are, Mr. Speaker, if we don't, under our standing order number 141, 2B, this bill will not see the light of the day. Leader of Majority has made his positions clear. May I say that there are issues that, according to this bill, will be curing what the earlier bill didn't take into consideration, Mr. Speaker. And the day will come to the committee of the whole House, we shall actually try to improve this one in order to remove the inequities that were there in the first bill, that according to the report we have received from the Leader of Majority, the Council of Governors have also expressed their concerns that that bill is not taking into consideration their concerns and interests. I support this bill to proceed, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Should we have Honorable Kimani Kuria, member for Molo?
I thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this chance to contribute to this bill. And Mr. Speaker, I'm following the conversations, especially contributions by the Honorable Leader of Minority, CPA Bandi. And I'm wondering really if the discussion of killing a member's bill should even be a discussion at this time, Mr. Speaker. The work of a member of parliament, above everything else, is legislation. And if an honorable member has taken his time and energy for the last 1 year plus to draft a bill that's supposed to cure something that has not been registered before, whether or not another bill has come or whether that bill has gone to wherever it is, I think it's only fair that we support such a bill, Mr. Speaker. I also sit in the Committee of Finance and National Planning. And when we took over with the able leadership of our chair, there was a lot of pending business, one of which was this bill, Mr. Speaker. Because in the last parliament, where the Leader of Minority also served, that this particular bill was never discussed. But now we have worked extra hard to make sure that every pending business before our committee has been prosecuted. And that's why this morning we are here to discuss this bill, Mr. Speaker. We've had pensions of senior citizens being mismanaged, being misappropriated. And Mr. Speaker, these are monies that these people have earned over the years, only for one to attain retirement age. Instead of retiring in peace and enjoying their pension, then you find that that money has not existed. But, Mr. Speaker, this is a piece of legislation that's supposed to cure that. And for this, again, I will really support Honorable Jagagwa on it. The issue of lap trust and lap fund and combining these two pension schemes to form one scheme is very welcome, Mr. Speaker. Because as a country, we have too many things doing everything. And as you know, Mr. Speaker, if the importance is to save the people, the pensions of, and to save and to invest the pensions of these members of county assemblies and other employees of counties, then I do not understand why we should have these two schemes. And it's very good that Honorable Jagagwa has proposed that these two pension schemes be collapsed into one. And to summarize, Mr. Speaker, an honorable member has taken his time for the last 2 years to develop and work on a bill. The least we can do as his honorable colleagues is support that bill and to make sure it's passed into law. And with that, I support, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Oduol Obaka, member for Siaya.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity. I've been amazed at the argument going on between the two bills that are like similar. Of the view that actually if it is similar, then we need to agree that it is similar. And then we can collapse them into one and acknowledge who actually came up with the bill. And maybe that will come later, not now. But that, at this point, I just feel that there's need to contribute to this particular bill, even though it may be the same as the one that has been sponsored by the government. The other issue is about the pension in itself. When you talk about retirement, one thinks of going home to die. I read an article one time about retirement, and it was all about going home to die. Why do people look negatively about retirement? Because when you retire, you terminate your services, and you're going home to have no income. You are going to go home to live in the rural areas, and you're going to start suffering from old age diseases. And that's why one gets so exposed to dying so soon after retirement. And that's why going home to die becomes the issue after retirement. But that should not be the case. Retirement should be a time when you're going home to live your last years comfortably and in a manner that does not reflect that you're going to be poor and that you're going to have no services. And so the contribution that one does during working years should be properly managed and disbursed on time. The experience we have had with old age in this country is that those who retire suffer. They suffer illnesses, they don't have good food, they live in bad houses, they don't dress well, and they simply degenerate into a life that they never lived before during their working years. And so the money that we put or we contribute during the years that we work should be managed adequately, and therefore the board that is created should be well run. I like the idea that thinking about retirement at this time is important. We know that teachers have complained about retirement. There are teachers in this country who retired in 1997. I remember in the last parliament, I was in the Committee of Education, and cases of teachers who retired in 1997 had never been resolved, and teachers have died without receiving their dues. It's a big shame for a country to allow such things to happen, because the retired people are actually senior citizens that in other countries are looked after very, very well. When you look at other foreign countries, retired people, which they call senior citizens, are given almost free services. When they're getting into public buses, they have special seats. They have special medical care. They have homes where they can stay when they don't have children or when there's nobody to take care of them. We are moving towards that direction, and we need to actually clean our house first by managing the funds that are contributed for retirement. My last point is that retirement should be a good time to go home and relax and wait for your days to end, but you must die or you must spend your last years, your sunset years, more comfortably. The fund for retirement should always be disbursed in time. Almost the last month of your working years, your retirement benefit should start coming. It should not delay, and it should not subject you to chasing for this money, to going to Nairobi, to going to the headquarters, fighting to get your money. It is your right. And once it is your right, it should come monthly without fail. And I think, to me, my contribution towards retirement is that both the bills that are coming in this House mean well. They have good intentions, and we just need to collapse them into one and ensure that where there's some differences, we panel beat that and come up with one big bill that will save this country, especially the old age. Otherwise, this is a wonderful bill. I support it, and I thank the Member of Parliament to have thought of this particular bill to save old age. In the villages, old age people are actually so vulnerable to various diseases. This is the only way to save them. This is the only way to make them comfortable. And we must also know that we ourselves are going to be old. We ourselves here in this House will be beneficiaries of the bills that we make in this House. Thank you, and I support the bill.
Next is Honorable Ole Sankok David.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. And Honorable Speaker, I rise, first of all, to give my voice into this particular bill. Honorable Speaker, I have read this bill and the earlier bill that we had just passed a few weeks ago, I think 2 weeks ago, and they all look the same. Honorable Speaker, if we continue with this trend of duplicating and try to compete against each other, and even to an extent of honorable members saying which bill came first and which one came later, who copied who or who copied from who. Honorable Speaker, it will be in futility. The fact that we have here is that we have a bill that is similar to this one, and it's already in the Senate. Let us wait for that bill to pass or to be rejected before we start another amendment of the same bill. Honorable Speaker, if this trend is allowed to continue, Honorable Speaker, then it means tomorrow I'll bring another person with disability bill while the other one is going on, and somebody else will bring. So we will be having around 10 bills discussing the same thing, because I've tried to compare both of them. Apart from probably some commas and some full stop and some English grammar, they have the same message. So, Honorable Speaker, we expect your ruling, Honorable Speaker, that this bill is the same with the earlier bill. Let us wait for the other one to go through Senate. If it fails, then we start another process. But for now, we cannot use the time and resources of this House to duplicate.
Honorable Ole Sankok, what is it, Honorable Muriuki Jagagwa?
As the Honorable Member, in order to revive a debate that was concluded by the previous speaker, who gave the leeway, and he gave a ruling that members can proceed and debate this bill. Now he's reviving the same issue. Is he in order to revisit that same matter barely 2 hours before a ruling was given by the speaker? If he wasn't in the House, then he should refer to answer.
Well, Honorable Jagagwa, that's true. Honorable Ole Sankok, is impossible to revive that discussion, but you can prosecute your case. But in terms of the ruling is already done.
Honorable Speaker, I stand guided, though I'm sure what I'm trying to bring out is that I oppose a bill that look like the other one, that apart from some grammatical issues and some commas, they are all the same. This House cannot use all its time to deal with a bill that is already through. So, Honorable Speaker, I have a right to oppose this bill, but nonetheless, congratulate the Honorable Member for trying, and he have already had his time, and for bringing such a bill. But next time, please let us not copy-paste bills that are already here. Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker.
Honorable, next is Honorable Wetangula Wanyonyi, member for Westerns.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me a chance to contribute also to this bill. Mr. Speaker, I think the rules are clear that when bills come the way they have come, and the House has cleared that the bill be debated, then it should move on. There's a stage when the House will make a decision. So I see no harm for us to debate this bill. Mr. Speaker, before I became a member of parliament, I served in the city council as a councillor. And there was a pension scheme there, Mr. Speaker, called Lab Trust Fund, of which I was a member. And that scheme was optional. You are free to join or not to join. And some of us who went there and immediately joined, when I was leaving that place, Mr. Speaker, I saw the benefit of this thing. And retirement benefits, Mr. Speaker, it should be something that we should support. And when we are legislating, Mr. Speaker, we are trying to say that during your time when you are contributing to the development of this country, at your prime age, when you reach at the retirement, Mr. Speaker, your lifestyle should not change. You should go into retirement and still have something that can keep you living almost the same lifestyle that you are living before. And that's why, Mr. Speaker, we have this kind of bill. And I think we should all support it because we want people who have made contribution to the development of this country, Mr. Speaker, not to retire in poverty. We've seen even members of parliament, the former members of parliament, Mr. Speaker, who come outside here and they look so, Mr. Speaker, they look so bad. So we would like to see that people retire into, Mr. Speaker, into a good life, and that they should not go out to die. We don't want people to retire and die immediately. Mr. Speaker, this bill addresses very many things, and if you look as the Leader of Minority was comparing with the other bill, Mr. Speaker, it doesn't matter who copied from who, but as long as we shall come up with a legislation that is going to give the people the senior citizens of this country, something worthy living for after their prime time in a contribution, Mr. Speaker. I've checked, Mr. Speaker, there are some issues like definition on retirement, Mr. Speaker, where it says a normal retirement age means the retirement age marked by the 60th birthday, where the exact date of the birth is known, and where it is not known, the first day of January in the year in which his 60th birthday is deemed by the sponsor. Mr. Speaker, the people with disability don't retire at the age of 60. If you look at the retirement, and it's not defined here, people with disability who are in employment, Mr. Speaker, they retire at the age of 65 because of the obvious reasons. Most of them get into employment at a very advanced age because of the disadvantaged position they find themselves in. So, Mr. Speaker, sometimes I think this will be a part of the amendment that we may propose to include that omission that will bring, will enrich this bill. Mr. Speaker, I support this bill and all the discussion going on, Mr. Speaker. Whether this one passes or the one in the Senate, it will all benefit the people that we are trying to support, the citizens of this country, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, I support, and Mr. Speaker, thank you for giving me an opportunity to contribute this.
Honorable Tum Chebet, member for Nandi.
Honorable Speaker, I want to contribute to this bill. I was a member. I was an employee of Eldoret Municipal Council for 16 years, and I used to contribute to Lab Trust. And when I retired, I was given my money, and there was the Lab Fund, where the junior employees used to contribute their pension money. So my question is, what is the fate of the savings of the employees who are in local authorities, those who are in county councils, those who are in town councils? What about their properties? Is this bill going to address the monies which belong to those employees? If it is going to do so, I was wondering why the two pension schemes were not collapsed into one, and given a name, they continue operating. If it is not going to be collapsed, what is the fate of the employees of Lab Trust? What is the fate of employees of Lab Fund? So if those questions are answered, I have no issue, because we have to safeguard the savings of the employees of the local government employees before the county government. If the two are going to come together, what are we going to do to the earlier employees? Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Honorable Edith Nyenze, member for Kitui West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand to support this motion by the honorable member I stand to say that retirement is very important for the Kenyans, and it's very important when we see our people contributing towards a retirement, because most Kenyans have a tendency of not being able to save. So when our pension scheme is set aside for people to save for retirement, it's very recommendable, and it's very good, because during retirement age is when people do not receive their salaries, and also this is during the age when people get some ailments and they are weak. They can't even work for, as they used to work when they were in active employment. So it's very important that this House discusses and also deliberates on the county pension scheme. As we discuss this one, we should also think of the fate of those ones who retired early, like the teachers who retired from 1997, who have not been paid their retirement benefits. We should also think of those ones who have retired, like the chiefs and also actually the civil service. People retire and then the payment is really delayed. And this puts them in a very pathetic situation, because one was used to getting a salary, and then when they retire, it becomes very difficult to stay without any payment. So there was a Musila bill which was passed in this parliament, and it was saying that people should be getting their pensions, the pension benefits immediately they leave employment, and if not, then they should continue with their salaries till they are paid their benefits. So I think we the government should take care of the payment, especially from the civil service, that it should not be delayed, because this would lead to suffering of our people. Then there is the local government employees and contributed towards their retirement, the savings. So it's my hope that this bill will take care of those savings which were done by the local government employees. And it was actually turning to billions of shillings. So as we have the new bill, that should also be taken care of, so that the employees do not, the retirees do not lose their benefits through this, the creation of this new pension scheme. Otherwise, I stand to support the bill, and I wish all Kenyans could save for their retirement. Even if they are not in employment, they can save through what we call Bao pension scheme. They can also save individually through different schemes, individual schemes, so that when they retire, they will benefit from what from their toil, when their sweat, when they were working. So I would encourage all the Kenyans to look for a way of saving for their retirements for a good future. Thank you.
Honorable Aso Ali, member for Saku.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity. I rise to support this bill. I have to say with a lot of integrity that I have seen the previous bill also. But I think in legislating in this House, what we must take into consideration, the best must give way to the good. As we legislate, even if there was an earlier bill, if there is a tremendous improvement to that bill, then we cannot say that the two bills are similar. Mr. Speaker, pension is very important, even for us sitting in this House. As we retire, during our twilight years, I think if there's nobody that is going to take care of us, something must take care of us. Mr. Speaker, pension, particularly at the county level, is a county business. And when we are discussing issues to do with the county, we must take into consideration the separation of levels of government, the national government and the county government. When these bills appear before the Council of Governors, I think they must give a nod that it fits into their scheme of things. Because if here in the National Assembly, because I believe the reason why this bill is before us is because it is a money bill. And since it is a money bill, it is before us, we should not lose the sight that this bill ultimately, it is the property of the Senate because of Article 96 of the Constitution. The function of the Senate is to look after the counties. Mr. Speaker, looking at this bill and also the previous bill, I think there are issues that we must take into consideration. All government employees at both national and county governments are permanent and pensionable. The bill must take that into cognizance. The other issue is that when we make this property of the counties, it means when the county is factoring their annual budget, they'll factor what goes into the pension, but not at the national level that we determine or decide what the counties must put into the kitty of the pension. So then the other thing is the board. When you look at this bill and the previous bill, the issue of gender must be considered. And that is why, while the bills appear to be similar, they are not the same. This bill clearly looks at the aspect of gender balance or parity in terms of representation in the board. The other issue, I think, in terms of representation, particularly in the board, is the employer and the employee. The employee must have a bigger say than the employer. Because if you are going to say that the employer is going to nominate 4 or 5 into the board, and then the employees, you say that they will only nominate 2, of course, that parity is missing. So for that reason, we really need to put aside other interests, but look at deeply whose interest is this bill serving? Not for today, but for posterity. Mr. Speaker, the other area of interest is, I think, benefits. The idea of pension is derived from benefits. As we try to tabulate how much an individual will get after 30 years of service or 40 years of service, it is calculated to the extent that does this individual per year, the benefit that he accrues from working continuously, what is there? So I think Honorable Njagagua's bill attempts to address what are the benefits that accrues to the employee. Mr. Speaker, The other thing which I think this bill addresses is liabilities. I come from County 010, which is Marsabit. These counties have inherited huge debts from previous county councils, and also this is the second government of the counties. They actually inherit huge debts from the previous government. So one thing we must ask ourselves, how do you manage these debts? Who is going to pay them? So, Mr. Speaker, in supporting this bill, I want to say again, with a lot of clarity, that whereas that there was a previous bill, does not in any way negate an honorable member to move a private member's bill. As the two bills arrive on the floor of the Senate can make a judicious decision of which of the two bills they are going to adopt or how they are going to marry the two bills. At the end of the day, what the two bills should address is pension to the workers in a county government. Mr. Speaker, finally, it is about this pension to the county government, whether they are county workers or the county assembly members. I think like Honorable Wetangula said, when somebody has served his nation with a lot of integrity and provided quality service, they must be able to live throughout their lives with a lot of decency and integrity, both for themselves and for their forebearers. So for that reason, I support this bill, and if there are changes or if there are attempts for honorable members to bring amendments, I think it is welcome. But we should not attempt to kill a private member's bill because there was a similar bill that preceded it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. Shall we have Honorable Jiro Muchangi, member for Runyenjes?
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to add my voice to this bill. And I want to begin by thanking the Honorable Muriuki Njagagwa for sponsoring this very good bill. And now that it has been indicated that the bill is properly before the House, I also want to say that this bill is by far the best and better than the previously sponsored bill. And so we have a reason to support it. And Mr. Speaker, I want to say that since we changed the Constitution, there has not been a very clear pension scheme for the county, for the now county governments that we have. And we are all aware of the challenges that face our people after retirement. So there is a reason for us as a House to support this bill so that we can allow our people to live a good life even after retirement. I believe that majority of us have interacted with the former councillors, them that were not able to get properly organized in the pensions scheme. And all they say to us is to help them pursue their pension, help them pursue their retirement benefits. They live a miserable life. Many of them are sickly, and they are not able to afford even medication. So this bill, Mr. Speaker, is going to offer the county government workers, both at the executive and in their county assemblies also, at least to have something after retirement, something that can enable them have a good life after they have left public service. Just this morning, Mr. Speaker, I got a call from a few teachers who are sending me to the Treasury to help them pursue their pension. And I was imagining of them, those others who have not been able to have a pension scheme, those that have already retired and want to take care of their families, they want to educate their kids. And so, Mr. Speaker, I think it is the highest time we consider this bill by Honorable Muriuki Jagagwa and help those that are working currently in our county governments so that in future they do not fall into such similar predicaments. So with those few remarks, I wish to support.
Very well. Shall we now have Honorable Pasadis, member for Nairobi City?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand to support the bill, and I commend the Honorable Muriuki Jagagwa for sponsoring the bill. We used to have the local provident fund, and we know that a number of retired councillors to date have not been paid their retirement benefits. And now we are amalgamating through this bill 47 counties and their subsidiaries. That's going to be a lot of money. And if invested well and invested in projects that can complement and sustain the staff of these entities in terms of their retirement in a dignified manner, we will have done a good service to the populace. But we have to also, while we come up with the laws like this and we have good endeavors, we want to achieve something positive for the workers, knowing that they will become old, they might be incapacitated and have to retire. What is important is to ensure that the investments from this major fund are put to such good use that at the end, when the person retires, the money that they're going to get from their pension is able to not only sustain them, but sustain them in the standards that they were already enjoying while, or better, while they were in employment. What is important also is for the fund to look at creative ways to invest. When I say creative ways, we know that with urbanization now, we've got a lot of county employees that are going to be living in the cities. These county employees, if, for instance, the fund puts up very good low-cost housing and allocates it to their members as an option, then they will be able to enjoy rent at real time. We also have a problem with retirement homes. We have a problem with retirement homes in this country. So I'm hoping that when the board gets into place, when this bill becomes law and the funds start being remitted, that they will be looking at creative ways to invest the fund. Because you would much rather than receive a check of, let's say, 50,000 in the year 2030. You'd rather receive a home that you know this home will give you real-time rent. So they have to be creative in how they will invest the fund. And then another thing is, I think the fund has to take advantage of electronics. Because if you take advantage of electronics, then people will know at real time how the fund is doing. Because if you're going to have a retirement benefit and then you only get to know at a later stage that the fund has been mismanaged or the funds have not been remitted by the various counties, so there's no investments happening, then there's going to be a problem because you will retire and then you're told that there is no money. I also feel that the government, to enable people feel that it's credible to make an investment in terms of pension, the government has to really sit down and address what happened with the local provident funds. Because all the members who are today languishing in poverty made contributions. The counties themselves did not remit this money. The money was not invested. So to make people have confidence that we are managing pension funds with true transparency and the government is taking responsibility, I think there is a need to address what went wrong and to also find a way to have a reparation on the funds that were mismanaged and lost, that have made our various councillors that are retired live in abject poverty. So for me, I support the bill. I believe that having a bill is one thing. Having people that actually manage the bill, manage the fund when it's created well, invest it well, and ensure that the purpose that was intended, that people retire with dignity, right, is achieved. And with that, I stand to support the bill. Thank you.
And next is Honorable Serem Corney, member for Aldai. You shall get the mic shortly.
You have given to open air.
Well, Honorable Member, just use the next one.
I'm not on my own, Mr. Speaker. I'm here on courtesy of people of Aldai, Mr. Speaker, who want their councillors to be paid. We have the money. Let them pay it as quickly as possible, Mr. Speaker. As we discuss this bill, we are going to advocate for those who are in the system. What about those who have just left the system, Mr. Speaker? We are not poor as a country. We have a budget of over 3 trillion, Mr. Speaker. We should be able to take care of our own. We are spending a lot of money to take care of animals, wild animals, Mr. Speaker. But we are not willing to spend even a penny of the guys who serve this country. Every year, this country are busy out there discussing about Mashuja Day, Heroes Day, and the rest. The same heroes are living in poverty, Mr. Speaker. And these are former teachers, former police officers, former DC, former councillor, and the rest, Mr. Speaker. So as we discuss all this, we should look into what can we do for the sake of those who are out there, who cannot speak for themselves. If this is the only house that we can advocate the interests of them, Mr. Speaker, let us also be fair to them, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, and I support the motion.
Very well. Let's have Honorable Wanyonyi Kevin, member for Kwanza.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity, and I just want to agree more than ever before with the previous speaker, Honorable Serem. I think what he's saying is exactly what I would wanted to say, that I think people who have worked and served this country with passion, with energy, time, suffered. Others, like the police who actually missed bullets, would have died years back. Mr. Speaker, I ought to agree with him, and I want to also say that this bill is properly in this House, and I think those who wanted to say it's not properly in this House were actually mistaken. One is that employees, after putting so much time and serve this nation with integrity that they deserve that time, are suffering out there. I've had cases where ex-members of the MCS come all the way asking me for transport to come to Nairobi, and I can tell you what, give them accommodation so they can go and look for their pension and go back home empty-handed. And therefore, I think this pension bill brought in by Mr. Muriuki is properly in this House, and we have to look at the fate and the plight of our brothers and sisters who served this country years back. And therefore, I think the best we can do is be able to look at this bill, and I hope that at the end of it all, when we pass it, I think there should be a follow-up implementation. All the comments made here, passionately made by members here, should be implemented to the letter. Most of these people, I think, are 5 of them who served when the county council were there. They look miserable. You go to their homes and just look at it. Their offsprings are suffering. They have not been educated. Others are sick. They have to go for Harambe to be able to take care of their offsprings. And therefore, I think something should be done. Those working in pension schemes in this country, please hear us. Let's make sure that at least they are able to assist those who retire. And as we talk about it, the value of a shilling, 1980, Mr. Speaker, 1995, is not the same value of a shilling today. It has depreciated, and therefore, whatever was being given 1990, today, surely is of no value. We therefore should be able to upgrade our shilling. If somebody was getting 15,000 shillings, surely today should not be the same. What's 15,000 shillings today? It's a pass fare from the Mr. Speaker. I want also to agree that this bill was properly before this House, and therefore we should be able to streamline it such that people do not suffer the way they have seen suffering. And therefore, I support this bill. Thank you.
Honorable Obo Mohammed, member for Lamu.
Asante Bwana Spika kunipatia hii nafasi. Mimi nina uoga na nimesimama kupinga. Kwa sababu napinga niko na uoga, mswada huu usije ukaleta madhara zaidi. Yale madhara tumesikia walotangulia kunena mbele yangu, wamesema yale madhara madiwani walopata. Ni kwa sababu tulipotoka kwa local government kuja hizi baada ya katiba, wale waliachwa na hawajapata kulipwa mpaka sasa ile walikuwa nafaa kulipwa. Isije ikawa hii itafanya kama hivyo. Kwa nini tuna haraka hatungojei ile mswada ambao umetangulia ukafika kule Senate kisha ndio tukaona itakuwaje? Uoga wangu pia naogopa isije ikawa hizi pesa zikenda kule county, na tunajua mambo ya county vile yalivyo, pesa zikenda zikafujwa. Tunataka kuwe na mikakati mizuri na tueleweshwe zitaenda county vipi, tusije kuwa hapa wabunge tukapelekwa kwa agenda za watu wengine. Hizi vita za hawa watu wawili, Lab Fund na Lab Trust, tuachie wenyewe. Lab Fund inafanya kazi na kuna wale wanapenda, na kuna Lab Trust pia wanafanya kazi na kuna wale wanapenda. Tuachie wenyewe wachague ipi itawasaidia. Asante Bwana Spika. Nimepinga. Sitaki hii.
Very well. Ona Bonyaga, Nkadha, member for Darakanidhi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to support this bill. Mr. Speaker, Honorable Jagagua is talking about the pension scheme for the county. I want to agree with them that the counties or the employees of the counties are Kenyans. They need to be supported. But as we support this one, Mr. Speaker, we need to remember that there are so many people who have worked for this country diligently, efficiently, but they are really suffering. We have so many teachers outside there, like those who retired in the year 1997. I remember very well, they were supposed to be paid their pension. But up to date, Mr. Speaker, they have never been paid. It is very sad. We need to take care of the people who have worked for this nation very well, because we have the finance.
This is a very wonderful idea. Second, the proposal that an investment be done is a good thing. This investment will add value to the funds available, and this will improve the resources available for other benefits of the workers. While it gives opportunity for investment, this bill also proposes a reserve fund such that they don't go extremely and deplete the fund. One other point that is very wonderful is that this fund, this bill proposes Sharia compliant for the Muslim faith. And I will suggest that other institutions should borrow from this, even the Parliamentary Service Commission, because some of us cannot even borrow the loans available because we are worried this might incur interest on what is being offered to us. So it's a wonderful thing. But the bill, maybe a few adjustments should be done when it reaches the public participation stage, where it is saying the lab fund and lab trust should be joined together. There's no need. If two different groups within maybe the county government, the Council of Governors, and the MCS want different funds, there's no need for them to be lumped together. Even at the national level, there are parastatals, different parastatals have their different schemes. Why should they be lumped together? Second, this fund should be decentralized. A lot of funds are wasted on people traveling to Nairobi, even at the national level, to follow up on their pension scheme. I think this should be decentralized, and it should reduce cost on the employees coming and traveling to Nairobi. I support this motion.
Honorable Kimiru Joshua, member for Kaiti.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to contribute on this motion. And for one, I want to thank Honorable Muriuki for coming up with such a motion, which is timely and a very important motion we need to discuss about. Mr. Speaker, from my constituency, Kaiti constituency, I had a meeting with these retirees, and they raised the same question about pension. And I think, Mr. Speaker, it's the high time we need as lawmakers to support this motion, because some of these people, they are our fathers, and they served this country, and they deserve to be paid their pension, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I remember there are those former councillors who we cannot forget about them, because they did a good job serving this country, earning little, and now they are languishing in the village due to poverty, because they did not get anything, Mr. Speaker. We need also to factor them and remember them that they did a good job to this country. And Speaker, I know there is a saying which says, what you need others, and it's the Bible which says, what you need others to do to you, do to them also, Mr. Speaker. So I think as members of Parliament, and I support the motion and say that we need these people, they need to be paid. And with the current technology, Mr. Speaker, I think we need to do this thing, we need to pay them on account level, Mr. Speaker. Because I can't imagine someone traveling all the way from Garissa to Nairobi to come and be paid there. Mr. Speaker, technology is there, and we need to consider them on their local areas, Mr. Speaker, which is counties, Mr. Speaker. I think, Mr. Speaker, as I support this motion, what we need, Mr. Speaker, we need proper monitoring. We need to supervise the payment. We need to put some strategies on how we'll monitor, Mr. Speaker, on the payment. Mr. Speaker, I support this motion, and I thank Honorable Member for coming up with the motion. Thank you.
Honorable Gojiri.